Well, Charles Moore reminds us, and I mentioned this in my opening comments, that a standard charge laid against people who don't have a religious outlook is that they don't understand the religious outlook, that we don't appreciate how it feels to be religious and to have that way of looking at things. And I pointed out that the great majority of people who don't have a religious outlook used to have one. Most atheists are people who have won through to an open-minded, free-thinking way of looking at the world from having been brought up in one or another religion, their parents' religion usually, and had it inculcated into them when they were very young. Of course, there is great evolutionary advantage for children to be extremely credulous. That's why children believe in Father Christmas, the Tooth Fairy, God, anything that the adults tell them with a serious expression on their faces. By the time they get to 11 or 12, they've lost their belief in tooth fairies and Father Christmas, but social reinforcement of religious belief is massive and pervasive, and that's why religious belief persists. So most people, almost everybody, more than 90% I would guess, do know what it's like to sit in church or synagogue or temple and to have be in that ambience. So we do understand it, and it may very well be that we understand it all too well. It's not that we don't understand it, we understand it all too well, which is why we disagree with it. That's point number one. And point number two, Charles and others say what we should try to make some sense of the inner meaning, the inner workings of a religious outlook. The problem is this, that religion, for somebody who is critical of its premises, is in the same sort of position as astrology. Now, astrology bases itself on the idea that what we can see from the planet Earth in the way of heavenly bodies has an influence on our character and our destiny. Once you've come to the conclusion that that just ain't so, then there's no point in getting involved in all the complexities of the different astrological theories. Once you've come to the view that this is just an untenable position, no point in going into all the things that Charles Moore says we should get into in trying to understand that the internal feeling of that position. Fact is that rejecting a certain view, rejecting a certain way of looking at the world entails nothing further other than a responsibility to begin to think carefully about what you do think and why, how you would make a good responsible case for that, and how you would live responsibly and well in a world where it is our job as human beings to make the best fist we can of our endowment in nature.
A.C. Grayling, thank you very much indeed.
I'd just take the opportunity, if I may, to address the last question, which was asked from the audience, about whether Charles and myself are not really on the defensive on this issue now. And strangely, I think I would want to admit that in a sense we are, because on the one hand, we're battling against creationist religious fundamentalists, and on the other hand, against the new atheists. And I've suggested at the beginning the sense in which they feed each other, and it's therefore very, very difficult to get across the case for classical Christian thought in the Western tradition. And if I might say so, I think Anthony slipped into that again earlier on, where he put together not believing in fairies and not believing in what he called deities. But in that sense, the early Christians, as I said earlier, were atheists. They didn't believe in deities. They believed in the God of classical Western theism, who is not an existent in the world of existence, not a thing in the world of things, but the ground and goal of all existence, in whom all things exist. John of Damascus in the 8th century, and no doubt I might be scorned for quoting somebody such a long time ago, but John of Damascus in the 8th century, great bastion of Christian orthodoxy in the East, said, what God is in himself is totally incomprehensible and unknowable. And it's that sense of the mystery of God. We can use words about God and deity and deities, but in the end we're talking about something which is beyond human words. And I think it's that sense of mystery which both religious fundamentalism and the new atheism somehow fail to point to in any way. And
in just 10 words each, if God didn't create the universe, why are we here?
We find ourselves here, and I would agree with the other two that we find ourselves here. We should assume responsibility for our lives and exult in the good things and do what we can to remedy the evil things.
Slightly more than 10 words, but very clear.
I don't see why this is a question I have to answer. It's not my problem.
Not Charles Moore's problem. If God didn't create the universe, who did, gentlemen?
Oh, that you've changed the question, and that if I may say, is a silly question. The question you first asked is if the universe wasn't created by a supernatural agency of some kind, then what are we doing here? My answer is we're here to create meaning and to take care of one another.
Thank you very much. You could be nice to me later. Richard Dawkins.
If God didn't create the universe, who did? In a way, that's the whole point. That smuggling in of that word who is begging that huge question. Nobody created it, and if you try to postulate something like a God who did, then you've opened up an even larger question than the one you've solved. To answer the question of how did the universe come about by saying it was created by a God is to create a bigger question. It's to provide no answer at all. It's a non-answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I think we've had an absolutely marvellous debate, superb questions from the floor, and outstanding comments from both the panellists. And thank you also for the Twitter questions for those on live feed. And just to mention the debate, the Wellington Square debate in February on the environment, and is global warming just as Lord Lawson would suggest, really quite an absurd thing, and we ought to be pleased in many ways about global warming and what's the point of view. And then on the 4th of July, we have, as part of the Sunday Times annual Wellington College Sunday Times Festival, the third in the series. And now, before I wish you all a very safe onward journey, and thank you very much indeed for supporting tonight. The online vote was for the motion was 12 agnostics, 35 for it, and 877 against the motion, which could mean that atheists go online. And the don't knows amongst the cognoscenti, those with the presence of mind, the consciousness, the belief to be here tonight. 389 didn't know before the motion, and now only 85 don't know the truth. For 333 before and 675 against. After everything they've heard, those for voting for the motion have gone up. They've gone up from 333 to 363. Those against from 675 up to 1,070. Sorry, 1,070. It says 675 to 1,070, and therefore I declare that the vote has been carried against.
I think now you need an actual combination.
Just working out the percentage. Can I just conclude in 15 seconds by thanking the Intelligence Squared, all the organisers from Wellington College, everyone for coming, and again, please, a very big round of applause for our panellists. Anthony, fair?
Yes, very, very fair.
Charles, I'm sorry. Well done, you did really well.